It was Mother's Day, May 13th, 1984, a warm spring afternoon near Tampa, Florida. After spending time with their moms, two boys raced off to fly parachutes made from plastic bags. It was the perfect way to spend a Sunday. But soon, the wind brought a foul smell. They went off to investigate and found a sight they would remember for the rest of their lives.
In 1984 in South Florida, a rapist and murderer was on the loose. The killer was a ruthless and terrifying predator, the newest member of an infamous group known as serial killers. He kills just for the sake of it. And though his acts at first seem random, his choice of victims is fiercely selective. A woman's occupation, or even her hairstyle, may be enough to make her a target. It takes time, at least 2 kills, before the pattern emerges. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. The serial killer's world is a delicate balance. On one side is the threat of capture. On the other is his overwhelming need to publicize his crime. Our job is to use everything at our disposal to tip the balance in our favor.
What the boys found was the body of a nude woman lying in the roadside weeds. The medical examiner determined she'd been there for about 3 days. Her wrists were bound behind her back, and a rope with a trailing extension was tied around her neck like a leash. Bruises, blisters, and insects covered her body. But it was the position of the corpse that told detectives this was not a typical murder case. Major Gary Terry, then Lieutenant Terry, had just been appointed head of the Hillsborough County Major Crimes Unit when he got the call.
But the unique thing about the body to me was the fact that her legs were spread about 5 foot 1 inches apart from heel to heel. A scene that I'll never forget and a scene that I've never seen before.
The pose was so grotesque, the body seemed to have been positioned that way deliberately. Had the killer meant to shock whoever found it? Crime scene technicians photographed the body and measured its distance from the road. They carefully packaged what little evidence was left, some cloth tied in a knot. Detective Pops Baker of the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department also found tire tracks. He worked that night to make plaster casts. Tire casts can reveal the make and size of tires to help experts deduce the size and type of car a criminal is driving. They can also link him to a crime scene. Meanwhile, the body was brought to the medical examiner's office with the ligatures in place for him to study and photograph.
Is there any visible signs?
The medical examiner determined the victim had been raped, then strangled to death. The brutality of the crime brought a sense of urgency to the investigation. Fearing this would not be an isolated case, Lieutenant Terry immediately contacted the FBI's forensics lab in Washington, D.C. Terry had a detective hand-carry the evidence to the FBI lab. He had learned during an earlier case that doing so expedited the processing of evidence and brought the FBI in as an immediate active partner. The FBI lab is one of the foremost forensics laboratories in the country. There are experts on every type of evidence, from bullets to fibers to vehicle parts to nuts. The FBI's knot expert analyzed the ligatures from the Tampa victim's wrists and throat. They had been removed intact in hopes they'd tie the killer to his deed. They might also say something about his past. Specialized knots might reveal that he had been a merchant marine or in the military. But the ligatures turned out to be tied in granny knots, simple, functional knots that anyone might have tied. An FBI fiber expert analyzed the fabric found near the body. He brushed particles from the cloth onto a sterile sheet. What traces had the killer left behind? The analyst scanned the particles with a magnifier, but he didn't expect to find much. Such evidence is easily lost through weather or other contamination of the crime scene. In fact, the rule of thumb for fiber evidence is, in 4 hours, 80% is lost. In 48 hours, it's 96%. After 3 days, the chance of finding anything is almost nil. So he was amazed when he found a small speck of red nylon fiber. It was trilobal, meaning it consisted of 3 lobes and had a lustrous or shiny coating. From its size, type, and shape, he guessed it was a carpet fiber, maybe from the killer's car. The fact that it was there at all was a minor miracle. The analyst from the FBI lab told the Hillsborough detectives to keep the discovery secret. If this were a serial killer, publicizing fiber evidence could make him change his pattern or his vehicle, so he'd be harder to find. The FBI's tire lab also scored. From the tire casts, they determined the tires were of 2 different brands. All were well worn and mounted reversed, with the black walls facing out. An irregularity like that could be powerful, incriminating evidence. Back in Tampa, police identified the victim from her fingerprints the day after her body was found. She was Lana Long, a 20-year-old Laotian woman, a popular exotic dancer in Tampa's red light district. Her boyfriend had recognized her from a newspaper photo and had called police. He became the prime suspect. Officers questioned the girls on the strip, but received no information implicating the boyfriend or anyone else. They were stumped.
Okay, I'll meet you up here at the tape.
Then, just 2 weeks later, the calm of another holiday weekend was broken. On Memorial Day Sunday, Detective Pops Baker and Lieutenant Gary Terry of the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office were called to a second murder scene, again in an isolated rural area off an interstate.
Young female, late 18, 19, 20 range.
Like Lana Long, this victim was female, in her late teens to early 20s, and nude. She was also bound at the hands and throat, and had a knot at her neck with a leash-like extension. But this knot was different. It was a hangman-style noose.
I can remember driving all the way to the crime scene and saying to myself, please don't let this victim be bound. In 1984, we very rarely had homicide victims bound. That's the first thing I asked the officer protecting the crime scene when I drove up. Is she bound? And he said, yes, sir, she is. So we've gone from very rarely having victims bound to 2 within 2 weeks. So we knew we had a problem.
This woman had not been dead long.
She's still warm.
Because the crime scene was fresher than the last, more evidence remained. Detectives found a man's olive green t-shirt and some strands of hair, which they determined were not the victim's. Hanging from a bush a few feet away from the woman's head were her white pantyhose and white jumpsuit, both covered with blood. From the brutality of her wounds, detectives knew she had fought for her life, and that it had been a savage struggle.
And a ball just as the other ones have.
She had been raped, strangled, beaten, and her throat had been cut almost from ear to ear. The medical examiner reported 3 causes of death: asphyxiation, head injuries, and a lacerated throat. As before, Baker found tire tracks. Casks were taken for analysis in comparison to the ones found at the first murder scene. Once again, the crime scene evidence was hand-delivered to the FBI lab in Washington. Analysts found the same red, lustered trilobal carpet fibers as at the first scene. And this time, there were red trilobal delustered fibers too, with the shiny coating absent. It said fiber evidence is the silent witness, but this match seemed to scream that the cases were linked. Lana Long's boyfriend could not be tied to the second murder, and he was cleared as a suspect. The items found at the scene also provided other clues. The green t-shirt was a size large, suggesting a person of medium build and chest size. The head hairs were medium brown, from a male Caucasian. These 2 pieces of information began a physical evidence profile, which are shared with other law enforcement agencies. FBI tire expert Sandy Worsema analyzed the tire impressions and made another match. The tracks were the same as those from the first murder scene. Now she knew the position of each tire on the car and that they were mounted on a mid-sized vehicle.
The advantage of having a cast over the photograph is that I can actually pick the cast up, I can light it from different angles and different directions, and hopefully if there are any cuts or nicks or rocks that are caught in the tire, I'll be able to see that in the cast.
But perhaps the best clue came from what she didn't know. She knew 2 of the tires with a common Goodyear Viva brand, but a third wasn't on the FBI's extensive reference list.
One of the tire impressions they could not identify from their files. But what they did was gave us the name of a tire expert, a manufacturer out in Akron, Ohio. And we actually flew a detective, Corporal Baker flew out there personally with the tire impressions, met with the old salts out there at the tire factory, and they actually were able to identify that tire for us, and that was the Vogue tire. And in 1984 was a handmade tire that comes as standard equipment on Cadillacs. We had never even seen a tire like that before.
Back here over to the left. I'll walk you back here. Is that the
Police were told that if they found the car with that tire, mounted black walls out, it would be as positive an ID as a fingerprint. Analysis of the victim's knife wound revealed that the killer had a knife with a 3-inch blade.
Now we've got 2 victims, both bound and both connected forensically. So we knew we had a serial killer on our hands at that time.
It's just a gut feeling that I get.
Lieutenant Terry began to track the killer's strikes on a map, hoping they'd reveal a pattern of behavior.
Dump the bodies on.
He put out the word to patrol officers. Look for a white male with brown hair of medium build, driving a mid-sized car with the tires reversed. He may be carrying a knife with a 3-inch blade. Following the FBI's recommendation, Terry didn't mention the fiber evidence or the ligatures. From a composite drawing released to the media, the second victim was identified. 22-year-old Michelle Sims had a criminal history of prostitution. She'd been reported missing the day before. A key member of the Hillsborough County investigative team was Detective Randy Latimer.
At this point, though, we realized we're dealing with a serial killer that looked like he was probably preying on prostitutes. So we went out into the areas of the known prostitute areas and started contacting the girls and let them know what was going on, giving them our business cards that if they saw something strange to contact us, let us know. We're looking for information. We were frustrated that we couldn't get any leads, we couldn't get anything to go on.
Hey, Bob, what we got? Well, I've got a body down here.
Then on June 24th, another Sunday, Terry, Baker, and Latimer responded to a third murder scene. A worker had found a body in an orange grove.
Got a perimeter set up.
It was another female, but the pattern seemed different. This one was fully clothed, and there were no ligatures, so there was no reason to believe it was linked.
Well, as you can see,
But detectives didn't rule it out.
looks like it's been undisturbed for quite some time.
They delivered the victim's clothing to the FBI lab, just in case a connection could be found. This time, the fiber expert they had worked with before was not available, and someone else was assigned. He wasn't asked to compare the new evidence to the old, so he didn't. Nor did he begin the analysis immediately.
Doesn't look like
The body was so badly decomposed it only weighed 25 pounds, including clothes. It took some time to get an ID, and when it finally came, the victim's lifestyle didn't fit the pattern either. 22-year-old Elizabeth Ludenbach of Tampa was a shy assembly line worker who lived with her family. She had no criminal history and was not a prostitute, although she did frequent bars on Tampa's Strip. A note in Elizabeth's room said to find her boyfriend if anything happened to her. So detectives ordered a polygraph test.
I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and you just need to answer yes or no to those questions. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Did you know Elizabeth Ludenbach?
Yes.
Did you have a relationship with Elizabeth Ludenbach?
Yes.
Did you ever harm Elizabeth Ludenbach?
No.
He failed the polygraph test, making him the prime suspect. It wasn't until mid-September, 3 months after the discovery of Elizabeth's body in the orange grove, that the results came in.
Yeah?
The FBI had a match.
Yeah?
They found red
That's
carpet
fantastic.
fibers identical to those found in the first two murders.
Looks like Ludenbach is ours. They
Good.
found red fibers that connected up.
Now they had 3 related killings. Terry entered the new scene on the map.
Any kind of significant difference?
Every detective on the homicide squad was working the case. The nature of the investigation began to change. Instead of focusing on boyfriends and neighbors, detectives pursued an unknown killer terrorizing the women of Tampa.
We've taken the entire homicide unit now, are concentrating on these cases. And we're running down leads, we're getting telephone calls about different people, and we're checking those leads out. We're doing a background investigation of these particular victims, and we're coming up empty. And all we have to do is, unfortunately, wait, and then there's another victim that's discovered. And that is victim number 4.
After a lull of more than 3 months, the calm of yet another Sunday was shattered. On October 7th, a worker found a body near the entrance to the K-Bar Ranch in northern Hillsborough County. This time, Detective Steve Cribb was assigned to help process the scene. He, Terry, Baker, and Latimer didn't have to look far for the first grim piece of evidence: the victim's bra hanging from the entrance gate. The nude body of a young black woman was nearby. Her clothing was beside her. Most of the detectives ruled her out as a serial victim. She had been raped, but unlike the others, she had been shot, not strangled, and there were no ligatures. Also, she was African American, and usually serial killers don't cross racial boundaries.
Get her into a controlled environment, we'd be able to really inspect.
While the FBI analyzed the evidence, detectives identified the victim from fingerprints. 18-year-old Chanel Devon Williams had just recently been released from jail on a prostitution arrest when she disappeared. She was last seen working the red light district along Nebraska Avenue with a friend, another prostitute, a few days before. She had been dead about 6 days. The FBI's hair and fiber analysis revealed it was the work of the serial killer. Both types of red fibers were found on Chanel's clothing, along with a brown Caucasian pubic hair. By crossing racial bounds and using a different weapon, the killer had changed his routine. Shifting from a pattern is very rare in serial killers and would make this one more difficult to capture. Chanel was added to the map near the Pasco-Hillsborough County line. With 4 dead, detectives were desperate to find the killer and obsessed with the case.
You don't work these cases. You live and breathe these types of cases. You go home at night, you dream about this case. You eat and sleep it. I would go home at night and just look at the telephone, waiting for it to ring. Every Sunday. For some reason, the first series of bodies were discovered on Sunday. On Sunday, I didn't plan anything. I sat at home.
Indeed, the Sunday after Chanel's body turned up, Terry, Baker, Latimer, and Cribb were called to another murder scene. This one was near Lake Thanodasassa, northeast of Tampa. A couple of amateur archaeologists had uncovered a morbid find. At the side of the road was a woman's body, wrapped in a gold-colored bedspread, tied with a blue jogging suit.
I think we need to.
Inside, her lower legs and ankles were bound with common white string. Her hands were tied in front of her with a red bandana. She had been bound, raped, strangled, hit on the forehead, and dragged through the dirt. It seemed the killer was back to his old pattern. The woman was quickly identified from fingerprints as 28-year-old Karen Dinsfriend. Raised in an affluent suburban household, she had died a drug-ravaged prostitute. She was last seen alive in the early hours of the day she was killed. As if there weren't enough to link the killer to the crime, investigator Steve Cribb actually saw red trilobal carpet fibers on Karen's body. By now, he'd developed a sixth sense for them.
When you know what you're looking for, they almost look like glowworms on the victims. But for the average person to walk up and find them, even the other investigators who weren't looking for this type, they wouldn't see them. But they became such a key point of the investigation that when we went to a crime scene, that's one of the first things we would look for with the carpet fibers.
At the FBI lab, the fiber expert compared these fibers to the ones from the other crime scenes. They matched. There were now 5 cases linked to a single killer, but there was still no name, no face, and no one under arrest.
It becomes very frustrating that you know someone else is going to die because you haven't stopped the suspect. You have enough information to know that he's doing it, but not enough information to pick him out of the crowd if he were to bump into you walking down the mall.
Because you have to remember, in this series of cases, our concern is if we don't stop this guy, if we don't find him today, he's going to kill somebody tomorrow or the next day. And when in fact he did.
2 weeks later, on Halloween, another victim emerged. A contractor digging a ditch found the mummified remains of a woman's body. Terry, Baker, Latimer, and Cribb arrived at the scene. The medical examiner estimated the body had been there for about a month. The body was badly decomposed. An ID would require special measures. The FBI lab needed to soften the skin on the hands in order to get fingerprints. As hard as the victim was to identify, detectives instantly recognized the killer.
The body had been completely mummified. The head had been separated by animal activity. There were no ligatures attached, no clothing. And again, you just look at the body and you realize it's him again. You just have that feeling by now of the crime scenes, of seeing body after body after body, that it should be the same killer. And in fact, it was.
Then at 7:30 a.m., on Sunday, November 4th, a call came in to Tampa police that seemed unrelated. A man reported his daughter had been abducted and raped. 17-year-old Lisa McVey was leaving work at a Krispy Kreme donut shop on her bicycle. It was around 2:30 a.m. A man snatched her off her bike, threw her into his car, and drove off. He held her at gunpoint, reclined her seat so no one would see her, and told her to remove all of her clothes. He took her to his apartment, bound and gagged. She'd been sexually abused before, and she knew how to read the moods of an abuser. Lisa sensed resistance might send this man into a rage, so she quietly did what he wanted. Lisa memorized all she could about her surroundings. At first, she peeked out from beneath her blindfold. Then, when he uncovered her eyes, she saw everything, including his face. She was certain that now he'd never let her leave alive. He took her to his bedroom and repeatedly raped her for 24 hours. Sometimes he slept, but she knew he was armed and that he'd kill her if she tried to leave. After a full day of captivity, the man told Lisa to take a shower. Then he gave her some clothes and made her a sandwich. To her amazement, he said he would take her home. At around 3 a.m., they drove toward her neighborhood. On the way, he stopped at a 24-hour teller machine to withdraw money to get gas. Peeking under her blindfold, Lisa continued to memorize details. The Howard Johnsons, road signs, the word Magnum on the dashboard of his car. he finally released her near her home. After Lisa's adoptive father reported the abduction, she was interviewed by Tampa police officers.
I want to ask you everything that happened the night when you left work, and I'm going to record you.
They were amazed by her almost total recall and fierce resolve to catch the rapist.
Well, I always leave work about 12 o'clock. I got on my bike.
Although Lisa had not been killed, there were many similarities to the Hillsborough cases. The abduction, the rape, the man's build and hair color, and even the red interior of his car. Tampa police sent Lisa's sweater to the FBI lab.
We were inundating the FBI lab with things to compare for fiber samples. Rape cases, assault cases, anything sexually related, any violent crime, we were sent to the FBI lab for a fiber comparison.
Meanwhile, just a week after the last body was found, Pasco County detectives were called to another murder scene. On November 6, 1984, a woman's body was found on the same road as the fourth victim, Chanel Williams. Only this time it was to the north, in neighboring Pasco County. Pasco detectives called Hillsborough detectives to a vacant lot near a mobile home park.
If you look right here,
The body was in a different county, but the ligatures and fibers were all too familiar. Although the body had decomposed to mainly bones, the telltale leash was still attached around the neck.
a little bit of shoelace right around
There was another ligature on an arm bone.
It's supposed to appear to be.
Near the body were the woman's tattered blouse and panties, and some jewelry.
Careful of that ligature around the neck. We're going to just leave that there.
The bones were scattered over almost an acre. When the medical examiner pieced them together, they seemed to belong to a young, white female. She was later identified as 18-year-old Virginia Johnson. Ginny divided her time between Connecticut and Florida, where she worked as a prostitute. She'd disappeared on her way to buy cigarettes about 3 weeks earlier. After all that time, it seemed impossible, but the FBI lab found a single red, lustrous fiber in Ginny Johnson's hair. Within the week, on November 12th, another jurisdiction fell prey to the killer. A body was found on an incline off North Orient Road within Tampa city limits. When Terry and Baker arrived, they found a young white woman, nude but for knee-high stockings. She was face down. When they turned her over, police knew from her bloodied face that she had been savagely beaten and that she had struggled. There were ligature marks on the front of her neck and on both wrists and arms, but no rope was found. Her wadded-up blue jeans and flowered top were near her body. Detectives Baker and Cribb immediately saw something stuck to the blue jeans, tiny red fibers. In the pocket of the jeans was the victim's driver's license. Kim Marie Swan was a 21-year-old part-time student who sidelined as an exotic dancer. She was last seen leaving a convenience store near her parents' home the previous afternoon. It seemed the killer had pulled off the road and thrown the body out of his car. There were faint tire impressions in the grass near the roadway. They would match the casts made earlier. The killer was picking up the pace of his killings, and the body count stood at 8. Terry and Baker were desperate. They drove to Atlanta to meet with a detective who helped crack the case of Wayne Williams, a serial killer believed to be responsible for 27 murders.
Because something we didn't really want to share publicly in 1984, what do you do when you're 10 bodies, 15, or 20 bodies down, and you don't have the suspect in custody? What do you do? We were sitting down in their office discovering, and during the course of that conversation, the telephone rang. And the telephone call was from the FBI in Washington. And the FBI lab says, we have just had a match on a piece of fiber evidence submitted from a rape case.
And I was blindfolded.
That case turned out to be the
Later when
abduction
you
and
woke
rape
up,
of
where
Lisa
was it?
McVey only a week earlier.
Well, when I
Tampa
came
police had
to,
rushed Lisa's clothing to the FBI lab, and experts there had found matching red trilobal carpet fibers on her sweater. It was the break they'd been waiting for.
I want to play it.
Terry flew back to Tampa immediately. He formed a task force of officers from the Hillsborough and Pasco County Sheriff's Office, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and the FBI, along with the Tampa police detectives already working the rape case. Then he divided them into teams, each with a different assignment. They initiated a massive manhunt. Patrol cars fanned out across North Tampa. They were looking for the killer's apartment and his red Dodge Magnum. The information from Lisa McVey was their roadmap. The additional personnel and resources brought in by the task force stepped up the search for Lisa McVey's abductor. Because the perpetrator used an ATM, one team of investigators subpoenaed the November 4th bank records for all local automatic teller machines. Another team subpoenaed a select list of all the Dodge Magnums in Hillsborough County, almost 500 cars. Then they compared the bank records and the list of Magnum owners, looking for a name that matched.
And the unique thing when you looked at both lists is that one name jumped out at you is Robert Joe Long. He had a money transaction from the money teller machine, early morning hours. He also was a registered owner of a Dodge Magnum.
In addition, earlier that day, a task force team from Tampa spotted a red Dodge Magnum on Nebraska Avenue, the killer's hunting ground. The detectives stopped the car. They told the driver they were looking for a robbery suspect. From his license, they identified him as Robert Joe Long. They photographed him and wrote up a field report. He was cooperative, but wouldn't let them search his car.
Of course, they contacted the task force headquarters when they made the stop, and we told them go ahead and stay with it at that particular time, stay with the car once it left, and we put a surveillance team together then to stay on him.
At that time, a photo pack was assembled, a lineup of photographs, in which he was placed in that photo pack. That photo pack was shown or displayed to Lisa. She looked at it and said, "That's the guy that kidnapped me." And she pointed out Bobby Joe Long.
Lieutenant Terry had his man, but he couldn't risk making a mistake with a quick arrest. He needed time to obtain warrants and organize his team. To ensure public safety, Terry ordered non-stop surveillance of Long. Units followed Long's every move in unmarked cars. Maybe he sensed they were on his trail because he started cleaning house. Officers cleaned up right behind him. Even when he vacuumed his car, police seized the vacuum. They retrieved everything Long thought he was destroying. After months of tracking a phantom killer, the task force was not about to let him slip away. Less than 24 hours after Lisa McVey identified Bobby Joe Long, the arrest plan was firmly in place. The task force moved in. They had followed Long to a movie theater.
I'm right over here, Stewie.
As he watched the film, undercover detectives watched him. Long seemed unaware he was surrounded.
We're sitting at the war room we had constructed down at the operations center. And everything is just going 90 miles an hour. We have a surveillance team on the inside of the theater watching it. There's a surveillance team outside watching the car. And that nagging doubt comes to you. Is this really the guy you've been chasing for 8 months? Is this really the guy that has been killing these women? So we tell the surveillance team outside, listen, whatever you do, get up to his car. I don't care if you have to low crawl, whatever you have to do, get to the car and tell us what kind of tires are on the car. And the surveillance team came back and said, hey, there's Goodyear Viva tires on the car. They're all Blackwall. And he said, there's some oddball tire here named Vig, Vogue, something like that on the car. As soon as he said that, we knew.
When we pulled up and saw the car, saw the tire, the Vogue tire that had been described from one of our tire impressions, when we saw the seat that revolved, that laid back, the red carpet fiber, there wasn't a doubt in our mind that we had the right suspect.
Terry gave the order to arrest. Detectives followed Long as he left the theater. He was never out of their sight. They didn't know if he was armed, so as he approached his car, they jumped him and brought him to the ground. He didn't resist.
He was on the ground when I walked up to him and placed my badge next to his face and identified myself as a deputy sheriff, advising him he was under arrest.
They took Long's car to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's office garage. Steve Cribb immediately tore out a piece of carpeting and rushed it to an FBI fiber expert flown in from Washington.
Statement from you?
All right.
Meanwhile, Randy Latimer and members of the task force interviewed Bobby Joe Long, who had declined his right to an attorney.
I heard when they arrested you out on the street that you got some cuts and stuff on your hands and arms. Did they take care of all that for you?
Oh, yeah, just a couple scrapes.
Okay. You thirsty?
They were well prepared, having consulted the behavioral science unit at the FBI Academy on how to conduct the interview.
Detective Price?
Just where do you want to start?
The game plan was to start by addressing only Lisa McVey. Long confessed immediately.
Well, I went down there and parked my car.
After he admitted to the rape and abduction of Lisa McVey, we talked about why he let her go and what went through his mind and what went on. I rolled into questioning him about prostitutes. Have you ever picked up any prostitutes? He told me he had in Miami. I asked him about here. And he said, well, he might have.
Then they began talking to him about the murders. He initially denied it, committing any of the murders.
As the interview continued, the FBI fiber expert examined the carpet from Long's car. He compared this sample to the others. It was the moment of truth.
As soon as they put them on the comparison microscope, the FBI agent called back and said, bingo, it's a match. The carpet fiber from the car matches the carpet fiber from the different homicide scenes.
It's probably helping me out at this point.
Excuse me.
Terry told Latimer the news. Then Latimer explained it to Long.
I mean, we just got information.
He told him about the fibers and their significance, and about Long's brown head hair found at the crime scene, and the Vogue tire. Latimer let Long know that by the time they found the second body, they were already on his trail.
What can I say?
The evidence was overwhelming.
And he looked down, he had his legs kind of, his knees spread apart, and he looked down between his feet, and I said, yeah, I did it. I said, did what? He says, I killed him. Killed who? He says, I killed all those girls in the paper I killed. And then we just started going through them one by one after that.
But then it just became more and more, you know.
Long described each murder in a taped confession. The interview lasted 5.5 hours.
Bobby Long showed no emotion, no remorse. It was just an everyday conversation like you and I are having here. At the end, I don't remember if it was myself or Bob Price that asked him why he did it. And he said that was his secret and he was going to take it to the grave with him.
During the interview, Long also confessed to a 9th murder.
You can go right or you can go left. Go left.
When detectives found her remains, they also found more of the tiny red carpet fibers. The victim was identified through dental records as 21-year-old Vicki Elliott, a waitress. Long also helped identify his 6th victim, whose body had been found on Halloween. 22-year-old Kimberly Hops was known by the street name of Sugar. She was last seen by her boyfriend getting into a maroon Chrysler Cordoba, probably Long's red Dodge Magnum.
I'd like to thank the members of the press corps.
Late that night, Lieutenant Terry called a press conference.
The multi-agency task force has for months been investigating a probable serial killer.
The media thought police would announce yet another body.
County, Pasco County.
They were shocked by the arrest.
How long have you had this suspect?
Bobby Joe Long, and he's presently been charged with 10 homicides that have occurred over the course of the past 6 months within Hillsborough County, Pasco County, and the city of Tampa. He was arrested without incident and has subsequently confessed to several of the homicides under investigation.
Do you have evidence for all the homicides?
Where did you
Yes, we do.
Open 5.
In the coming days, Hillsborough detectives learned they weren't the only ones tracking Long. Task Force member Charles Troy, a Pasco County detective, stumbled upon the truth. He realized that Long fit the description of a man who had raped a Pasco woman months ago. Troy scoured Long's apartment for evidence. He found a photo album filled with photographs of nude women, including the rape victim. In jail, Long confessed and bragged about the crime. Detectives had also found clothing and jewelry from Long's other victims. It's a common quirk of serial killers to keep photos or other trophies of those they kill. Detectives soon realized that Long was the classified ad rapist, named for his M.O. He canvassed the classifieds for women selling beds and other furniture, and when they let him in, he brutally raped them. He had never been apprehended. Long may have raped more than 50 Florida women in the 1970s and 80s, some even during his murder spree. Now with Long finally in jail, detectives reflected on lessons learned.
It just shows the importance of physical and trace evidence, shows the importance of the cooperation with the laboratory and what they can do for you, and the effort that you have to put at a crime scene. The hours you need to spend there, you can't rush. You just have to be deliberate, take your time, and be professional in what you're doing. Because oftentimes the answer is sitting right there in front of you. And the smallest speck, the smallest little piece of information may be the one key that breaks this case.
As detectives got ready for the Thanksgiving weekend, they thought the horrifying 8-month string of killings was finally behind them. They packed up the boxes of evidence and hoped some semblance of normalcy would finally return. But even then, a quiet holiday seemed to evade them. On Thanksgiving Thursday, a couple out walking found a skull, bones, and some clothes, as well as 3 pieces of rope, including a leash-type ligature.
But what he really enjoyed was the pain, the torture, and the torment, and the control he exercised over these victims. You can see that in the early crime scenes with the leader, the leash-like attached to their neck, where he choked them out of consciousness. Then the victim wakes up, and he's still there astride her, raping her, torturing her. That's where Mr. Long got his enjoyment, his kicks. Killing, just eliminate a witness. He could do that without any compunction, without any trouble at all.
When a forensic dentist linked the body to a missing persons report, Long confessed. The victim was Artis Ann Wick, an 18-year-old bride-to-be who had vanished from a northeast Tampa street corner on March 28th. She had been missing for 8 months. Ironically, Wick was the first victim taken, though the last one found. She brought the known death toll to 10, but Terry has always believed there were more.
I'm confident he's killed other women, other people. Are we going to find those bodies or discover those other cases? I don't know that we ever will.
Bobby Joe Long was never convicted in the classified ad rapes, in part because the statute of limitations had expired by the time he was caught. He did receive 6 life sentences and 693 years for attacks on women in 1984 and 85. For the Hillsborough murders and the rape of Lisa McVey, Long received 33 life sentences. He was sentenced to death for the killings of Virginia Johnson and Michelle Sims. After sentencing, Long left the courthouse whistling a tune.
Mr. Long is a killing machine. He became very proficient at what he was doing, very skillful at it. And if Mr. Long ever sees the light of day, all you're going to have to do is follow the trail of his other bodies, of his other victims, because he will kill again. He enjoyed it.
Long remains on Florida's death row, with no date set for his execution. In 1989, residents of a close-knit apartment community in Virginia gathered for a holiday celebration. For Tammy Brannen and 5-year-old daughter Melissa, Christmas was always a special time. Then, without warning, the little girl was gone. Her disappearance ignited an impassioned search. Law enforcement and the local community spared no effort. But would they piece together the evidence and find her before it was too late?
In 1989, in front of close to 200 witnesses, a child disappeared. 5-year-old Melissa Brannen vanished from a Christmas party at her mother's apartment complex in Virginia. Children have a way of wandering off, but it soon became clear this was more than a case of a lost child. Someone had taken Melissa. What sorrow compares to a mother's grief? What kind of monster preys on children? I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. The hunt for Melissa galvanized the community as a nation held its breath and waited for word. All victims deserve justice. All criminals must be punished. But when a crime involves a child, the stakes become so much greater.
On December 3rd, 1989, the Woodside apartment complex in Lorton, Virginia held its Yuletide Christmas party.
How's he doing? Okay.
The Woodside was a large but friendly complex, a community that revolved around family life and children's activities. The kids were always excited about the party, which meant special treats and presents. A single mom, Tammy Brannen, had found in the Woodside complex a safe community in which to raise her only child, Melissa. As the evening wound down, Tammy stopped to visit with a friend before going home.
Cool, we'll have some pizza. How about that? Okay?
Can I go get some potato chips?
Okay, but come right back.
Okay.
I'm extracting down the ocean. Really? Mm-hmm. Good for you. Yeah. Did you? We gotta get ready. Okay. We have a lot to do. She's getting so big. So cute. She is. Did you see where she went?
She lost sight of her daughter for only a few seconds. But that was long enough for a mother's worst nightmare to begin.
Can you see my daughter? Melissa?
Melissa disappeared. The Fairfax County, Virginia Police Department was called immediately.
I'm going to do everything I can to find your little girl, but you have to tell me everything you can possibly.
Detective Bill Wilden assured Tammy they would do all they could to find her little girl. The detectives began questioning the people at the party. No one could recall seeing Melissa leave the party or anywhere near the front door.
I'm Detective Wilden. This is Rappaport with the
Richard Rappaport, the Fairfax Department search commander, joined Detective Wilden to organize the search party.
If you come across anything suspicious, an article
He would
of
head up
clothing,
the investigation.
Does everyone understand?
One of the possibilities, of course, was that she had just hidden somewhere in the building, was playing with some friends, or had wandered off. So immediately the patrol officers on the scene did a very good job of searching the building, and they began a search of the immediate area surrounding the building. The night of December 3rd was a bitterly cold night in the Washington area. Someone outside that was 5 years old without a lot of protection probably would not have survived through the night. It was that cold.
All the adults that can participate, I need you outside with flashlights.
Rappaport coordinated a more specific grid search of the area with patrol officers and dozens of volunteers from the complex.
Let's go.
The search effort began. Nearly 100 neighbors, police, and Army personnel from nearby Fort Belvoir combed the woods around the complex. Most were parents themselves, united by a single concern: to find Melissa. Like the detectives, they expected to find a shivering and frightened little girl lost in the dark woods and crying for her mother. Officers began to question the 200 people who had attended the party and interview over 400 other Woodside residents. Though the complex was large, many residents knew Melissa and knew her to be very shy. Shocked to hear that she had disappeared, almost all expressed doubt that she would ever have gone off without her mother, and certainly not with a stranger. Detective Wilden went with Tammy to her apartment to interview her. He questioned her extensively about her past and possible troubles with her neighbors or employer. An accountant, she had never had any problems with anyone. Tammy had lived at Woodside for over 3 years since her divorce from her husband in Texas. She had experienced the normal readjustments of a newly single mom, but she and her ex-husband were on good terms. When detectives discovered an open window in the furnace room, Jim Gogan, the crime scene investigator for the Fairfax County Police Department, was asked to examine it.
Right through here? The way the door was set up, everybody had to either go through the crowd to get out the front of the building. That was only the main door and the only door available to get out, with the exception of the hallway down to the bathrooms and the furnace room. They had large windows, and in the furnace room itself had a window, what was discovered open. And from there, the assumption was made that possibly that's how she was taken from the building.
Melissa's disappearance was suddenly far more complicated. The search for a missing child had become a possible abduction case.
Did you see her leave the party at any time?
The police continued their questioning with even greater urgency and began to hear repeated mention of the strange, even bizarre behavior of the maintenance man for the complex.
That was the last I saw.
What was his height?
Several of the women reported how offended they were by extremely vulgar sexual propositions made to them by Caleb Hughes.
There was a possibility that if she had been abducted for sexual purposes, that she might be molested, but we were very, very hopeful that we could at least find her alive before her life was in jeopardy.
Now that they were dealing with a possible abduction case, detectives returned to Tammy's apartment and collected nightgowns, hairbrushes, and bedclothes, any items bearing traces of Melissa.
Can you describe?
As detectives continued questioning the people at the party, They learned more disturbing details about Hughes' behavior that night. He had spent what seemed to many to be an unusual amount of time playing games with the children. He made the parents uneasy by touching the kids. There was something unsettling, something indecent about him.
At the party, he was not dressed as well as the rest of the people. He wore his work clothes. He mingled with some of the people he knew at the party, and he spent some time talking with Melissa's mother, making comments about Melissa, and offered to take Melissa and a couple of the other children to the restroom if they needed to go. He just had some very suspicious behavior from a man of his age around the children.
With growing suspicion, the detectives tried repeatedly to reach Hughes by phone, and then went to his house, but were told by his wife that she had no idea where he might be.
Were any of you playing with her tonight?
He had left the party sometime before our arrival there. He lived only 4 miles away, but it took us several hours for us to contact him because he had not yet returned home.
Finally, 2.5 hours after Melissa's disappearance, Caleb Hughes called the police, who then returned to his house. Upon questioning, he claimed he had simply taken the long way home. The officers immediately noticed he was wearing different clothing from that reported by witnesses at the party.
I washed clothes tonight when I got home. They're in the washing machine over there.
In the washing machine, they found the clothes Hughes had been wearing, as well as his sneakers and a leather belt with a knife sheath. The knife was missing.
You washed your shoes at 2 a.m. in the morning?
Yeah.
He'd been gone for several hours, and to come home in the middle of the night when your family was asleep and to feel the immediate need to wash everything you had been wearing, including your shoes, we found that rather suspicious behavior, and that just further added to our interest in his whereabouts.
As Hughes appeared reluctant to speak in front of his wife, the officers decided to take him to headquarters for further questioning. Suspecting that Hughes might be covering for time spent with a girlfriend, the officers wanted to allow him the opportunity to tell the real story.
Do you know Melissa Brannen?
No, I do not.
To the detective's surprise, there was no real story. Hughes had no alibi. He claimed he had no idea who Melissa was, that he had driven the long way home
Why were you
alone
washing your
after
shoes?
picking up a six-pack, and then had simply washed his clothes.
You normally wash your shoes with your clothes?
Sometimes, yeah.
What were they dirty with?
He said as an excuse that they were his only work clothes and he had to be to work the next day and they were dirty, so he needed to clean them for work.
Look, am I being charged with anything?
Despite hours of intense questioning, Hughes remained smug and evasive.
I'm free to go.
Finally,
Yeah, you're free to
Detective
go.
Wilden told him he was free to go,
But I know you're
though he
guilty.
was almost certain Hughes was lying.
Well, you're gonna have to prove it then, aren't you?
As far as the Fairfax County Police Department was concerned, Caleb Hughes was the prime suspect. Believing Caleb Hughes was involved in Melissa's disappearance, Detective Bill Wilden contacted Fairfax County Commonwealth Attorney Robert Horan.
It was a suspected homicide, certainly by then. He made some statements that were out of character for somebody who really
Melissa
is
Brannen?
a suspect in a crime of this nature. You would normally think the minute somebody would suggest you or I have abducted a 5-year-old child.
Look, am I
I
free
mean,
to
you
go?
would think it would be
Am I
the
being
most
charged?
vigorous, vehement outburst. Of course I didn't. Well, they got nothing like that. Matter of fact, at one point he said to Wilden, "Prove it," which is again an unusual reaction for somebody who had nothing to do with it.
Gogan had photocopied Melissa's picture and printed hundreds of flyers to help in the search.
And as the sun came up, the search expanded into further down south on the highway. They sent soldiers out to do massive searches through the woods, along the railroad tracks, and as possible ideas of locations where she might have been were developed. Again, hundreds of people were gathered to search and walk those areas.
The car Hughes had been driving that night belonged to his wife. She gave investigators permission to impound and search it. Detectives examined it for fingerprints, blood, fibers, hair, any evidence that would document Melissa's presence there. Fingerprint tests revealed that only the Hughes family had left prints on the car. Next, all the hairs and fibers needed to be collected from the interior. This type of trace evidence was usually retrieved with a vacuum cleaner, but there was simply too much debris inside.
When I first approached the car and looked inside, I just kind of went, whoa. They had 2 large dogs, the Hughes. They carried them a lot in that car. It was just cluttered with dirt and debris and just a mess inside that car. And I just kind of shook my head like this was going to be a real challenge. So I decided to use the masking tape as an alternative to the vacuum cleaner, just hoping to just get what was on the surface.
That was an unusual technique, certainly. In my years, that was the first time I ever had run into it in the Fairfax Police Department. And it's a very common technique now.
Gogan then placed the tape between layers of clear plastic so that it could be examined intact under a microscope. As the car processing continued, Melissa's disappearance quickly became the lead news story in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area.
Melissa Brannen is 3 feet tall, 48 pounds, with blue eyes and dark blonde, shoulder-length hair. She was last seen wearing a pink ski jacket, red plaid skirt, and black shoes with gold buckles.
The night of the party, Melissa had been wearing a navy blue acrylic sweater with a Sesame Street Big Bird picture, red tights, a red cotton plaid skirt, and a pink parka.
When I found the red-blue fibers that were visible on the tape, I did kind of get excited about that. But at the time, I was excited but worried because we needed to find her to identify the clothes, the possible clothes. Without Melissa, that was going to be real tough.
When Gogan conducted luminol testing on the interior of Hughes's car, he found traces of blood on the steering wheel, brake pedal, and floor mat. When a light is shined on the luminol-treated area, bloodstains will appear fluorescent. While the luminol process is quite accurate as a blood locator, it can also destroy the genetic characteristics of the sample.
When I sprayed the steering wheel, I got the reaction on the steering wheel and as well as on the pedals of the vehicle. That's where it fell to. These items were swabbed and collected.
Hughes's shoes had been washed, but the lab was able to identify possible blood stains on their soles where fresh cuts had been made.
It became very suspicious when I received the clothes from the officers who searched the house and noticed that he had cut his tennis shoes. Kind of putting 2 and 2 together, that why was he cutting his tennis shoes and why did I get a reaction to blood on the gas pedals?
Surely Caleb Hughes had tried to cover his tracks to avoid a link to an unimaginable crime.
What is your name?
Caleb Hughes.
How old are you?
With the luminol findings showing blood in his car, the detectives were increasingly confident they could get a confession from Hughes. He was brought in for a polygraph test. He had no explanations for the fresh cuts on his shoes.
No.
Once again, he gave no explanation for the 2-hour, 30-minute delay in getting home.
But as it turned out, there never was an explanation. He said, I just took the long way home. It was the best they got.
Did you harm Melissa Brannen?
No.
Did you kill Melissa Brannen?
No.
These are proven to be deceptive.
When Hughes denied outright that he had killed Melissa, polygraph examiner Rick Danielle was sure he was lying.
He really denied ever having seen this child, that I'd known who the child was. He was showing pictures of her, never seen that child before. And of course the police knew that was not true, because he had been at the same table with the child, had talked to the child.
You got the wrong guy.
I'm asking you about what you did.
You got the wrong guy.
Danielle was absolutely satisfied he was hiding something, that he was lying about something.
So close to getting you.
I'm out of here.
He was attempting to deceive him. But of course, none of that under Virginia law, as you may know, that's evidence. You're not allowed to use it at trial.
Investigators were convinced Hughes had abducted and harmed the beautiful little girl. But Tammy Brannen tried to keep her hope alive, fighting her worst fears. Melissa's Christmas presents waited under the tree.
News 7 has confirmed tonight that the investigation into the disappearance of 5-year-old Melissa Brannen appears to be focusing on one primary suspect. Police will continue their search efforts and to pursue leads. There is now a $10,000 reward for any information concerning Melissa's whereabouts.
For Tammy Brannen and her parents, the hours passed in an agonizing wait for more information. Melissa's disappearance electrified the tiny rural community of Lorton, a suburb of Washington, D.C. Only 5 months earlier, 10-year-old Rosie Gordon had been bike riding in her neighborhood when she was abducted, raped, and murdered. Her killer had never been found.
Nice to meet you too.
Rosie's mother quickly came to Tammy Brannen's support.
The yellow ribbons that punctuate trees and balconies at the Woodside apartment complex in Lorton have weathered
Once Melissa's
3
disappearance was
snowstorms.
reported
They've
on the
held their
news,
position
the community
through fear
rushed to
and
her support.
speculation as to the
Yellow
whereabouts
ribbons
of
began
5-year-old
appearing on
Melissa
Christmas
Brannen.
trees throughout the area.
By all indications, Tammy was a wonderful mother, very loving mother, very, very protective of her child. Melissa was her only child, and I just think all those facts together struck a chord that virtually anyone could identify with those circumstances, and people's hearts went out to the Brannen family.
Hundreds of people volunteered to post flyers throughout the region and assist the local authorities in their search. A new expert was also brought into the search effort. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children sent John Gold, one of their search and rescue consultants.
We are legislated into being as the state clearinghouse for all the information regarding missing persons, and we also assist families and law enforcement kind of as a liaison between the two, working as many cases as we can.
After debriefing, Gold and his partner went directly to the apartment complex clubhouse.
Check your stride out here.
Outside, they found adult male footprints leading from the furnace room window to a split rail fence whose top rail had recently been broken.
We began to find transferences on the other side of the fence into a small parking lot there beside the clubhouse, in the parking lot, I think, with an abandoned restaurant or some type of building there. And that's where the track stopped.
Straight through here, over this fence.
Right from the beginning, we found the adult footprints, but we never found a child's footprints. So we felt comfortable that if that was the abductor we were looking for, and we felt pretty comfortable that it was, that Melissa was probably being carried, even from outside the window, was being carried by the abductor to the point where she and the abductor got in the vehicle.
But where would Hughes have taken her?
I don't know.
Detectives received a lucky break when they interviewed Hughes's wife.
She had been somewhat suspicious that he might go somewhere else after work. She didn't want him to go anywhere except to work and directly back home. And so unbeknownst to him, she had made a note of what the mileage was. And the following day told us that she had checked the mileage again and that 12 miles had been put on the car. We now had another piece of possible information about the extent to which he could have gone that night. We first marked the location of the crime. This was the apartment complex in southern Fairfax County. We next located Caleb Hughes' residence, which was in northern Prince William County, roughly in this area. We then took a string that was the equivalent of 12 linear miles and tied the two ends of the string together and placed them over the pins. So we simply took a pencil and defined that area so that any point at the end of that string represented the outer limits of the search that was conducted on December the 8th.
Within 3 days of Melissa Brannen's disappearance, investigators had organized a 25-square-mile joint search with the Army, Police Department, Civil Air Patrol, and Coast Guard. Over 500 volunteers turned out for the effort.
We have a 12-mile radius that we need to cover.
Black patent leather shoes, with gold bows, and clean fitted jacket.
We had dozens of search teams that were comprised of trained law enforcement people, civilian volunteers, and military personnel. They were doing step-by-step searches of defined areas. Each area had been broken down and was assigned to a team.
We're going to be looking for the clothing a lot. That's going to be one of the main things.
They had specific instructions on how to search. If they found anything which they thought might be evidence, they were to mark it, not to disturb it, and we had teams of crime scene people who would then respond to that particular location and process the evidence.
At this point, we've not found anything today that puts us any closer than we were this morning.
The volunteers were frustrated and extremely disappointed.
I know there were nights when I would go home and my family would have seen a newscast about another day of searching, and my own children would say, "Daddy, are you going to find that little girl? When are you going to find that little girl?" And I think that was a conversation that was occurring in the homes of dozens of investigators and police officers involved in this case.
While the search continued, Gogan approached the nearby FBI lab with the evidence he had processed from the car. Because Melissa was still missing, the FBI's state-of-the-art technology would be critical in establishing the connection between the hair, fibers, and bloodstains collected and Melissa Brannen. Agent Doug Diedrich of the FBI's Trace Evidence Unit would examine the evidence. Perhaps he could find a link to Melissa Brannen.
There you have to go to extraordinary measures to try to recreate, if at all possible, the environment of the victim, most recent environment, and also the types of hairs that the victim may have, the type of clothing that the victim may have been wearing the night of the disappearance. And that's the difficult part.
As long as Melissa was still missing, filing charges against Caleb Hughes was all but impossible unless compelling evidence could be found. Diedrich and the lab examiners were impressed by the large number of fibers that had transferred onto the passenger seat of Hughes's car. Fairfax County investigators had identified nearly 70 different fibers.
That included the blue acrylic fibers, the red cotton fibers, the black rabbit hairs, and there were, I believe, 1 or 2 head hairs in the case. But that's monumental. Sounds like a small number. That's huge.
Once the FBI entered the case, its agents conducted their own investigation of Hughes's house. When Caleb Hughes's name was released as the primary and only suspect in the case, a media frenzy followed.
Hughes has not been charged in the case, but he is the target of round-the-clock surveillance by the FBI. Federal investigators working with police from Fairfax County last night executed a search warrant on the groundskeeper's rented townhouse. They recovered several items which have been taken to the FBI laboratory to be tested to see if there is any evidence linking this man to Melissa. In the meantime, the FBI's official comment is no comment.
The FBI brought the power of a federal grand jury to the investigation. The grand jury ordered Hughes to submit to blood and other forensic tests, something the local authorities had not been able to order. Hughes complained bitterly in interviews that his life had been ruined by the invasion. Details of a troubled past emerged. Hughes grew up in an abusive, dysfunctional home. He had a record as a juvenile delinquent, a long history of drug and alcohol abuse, and a disturbing attraction toward children.
As an adult, he had been convicted of larceny. He had been convicted of car theft. He had been convicted of contributing to delinquency of a minor. The evidence indicated that he did spend a lot of time with young children, nobody the age of Melissa Brannen, but certainly a lot of children in their early teens.
In the lab, FBI examiners had begun analyzing the stains on the soles of Hughes's shoes. Though luminol testing had damaged the samples taken from Hughes's car, they became increasingly convinced that these minute traces contained blood serum proteins that could determine the crucial connection to Melissa.
This blood's been...
The samples were submitted for DNA and serology tests.
Make that for a slide, for sure.
15 days after Melissa's abduction, a candlelight vigil for Melissa was held at the apartment complex. The little girl's disappearance had united the Fairfax community in compassion and outrage.
And during that whole Christmas season of 1989, that every night on the 6 o'clock news, you saw the video shot that her grandfather had taken of Melissa Brannen. And I'm sure I was like many people in the metropolitan area of Washington who felt that they knew her from seeing this lovely child every night on television.
But shortly after New Year's, a judge in the next county received a letter from Hughes's probation officer informing him that Hughes had violated probation for an auto theft conviction 2 years earlier. On January 24th, the judge revoked Hughes's probation, and he was finally put behind bars. The earliest he could be released was November, giving the Fairfax County prosecutor ample time to build his case. Without sufficient evidence to file charges, Hughes had remained free. But now, with Hughes safely put away, the FBI had the time needed for the extensive testing required by the trace evidence. There was still a chance Melissa's body might be found, but without it, the case against Hughes would have to be made in the FBI lab. Already, FBI examiner Doug Diedrich had found his first big break in the case.
I remembered some black animal hairs in the debris from the front seats of the car. And in looking through the little girl's nightshirt, I noticed these similar black hairs sticking out of the nightshirt. So it just rang a bell. I went back, mounted those up on slides and compared them, and sure enough, dyed rabbit hair, and they matched each other.
The rabbit hairs from Hughes's car and those found on Melissa's nightgown both revealed a distinctive corncob texturing. An exact microscopic match. Agent Diedrich immediately called the prosecutor to determine whether Tammy Brannen owned a rabbit fur coat. Not only was it confirmed that Tammy Brannen owned a rabbit fur coat, she had worn it to the Christmas party. Her mother had bought it in Germany, and it was dyed an extremely rare bluish-black color almost unknown in the United States. Melissa had handled the coat at the party and at home. Diedrich had made the crucial connection between Melissa and the car of Caleb Hughes.
So you not only, you tied those rabbit hairs, you tied that match not only to the fur coat of her mother, you tied it to the front seat of the car, but you also tied it to the child's environment itself, the rabbit hairs on the shirt of the child.
To me, that was a significant point in the case, because then it starts pushing me in the direction of we might have something. And from there, it was a matter of digging some more, see if I couldn't find some additional fibers that may be of value. So I started digging a little bit more, starting looking a little closer, asking questions of myself, asking questions of the evidence, because it's speaking. Strange, but it's speaking to me.
As week after week passed, Melissa's name eventually disappeared from the news. Life in Fairfax County had returned to normal, but Tammy Brannen was still no closer to finding her child.
It's tremendously difficult for the family to come to terms with everything that has gone on, to come to terms with still trying to hold on to that glimmer of hope that their child's alive, and then the realization that in all likelihood, they may never find their child alive or may never find the body of their child even after they've been murdered.
Tammy was forced to face the reality that by now, there was almost no chance Melissa could still be alive.
We wanted to close this case and not just close the case in the sense of identifying and prosecuting a suspect, but we wanted to bring real closure to the case in answering the question, what happened to Melissa Brannen that night? Why did it happen?
Such questions plagued Tammy Brannen. Depressed and unable to work, she remained secluded in her apartment, waiting. Agent Diedrich had examined the blue acrylic and red cotton fibers in the passenger seat evidence collected by Jim Gogan. At first glance, they appeared to match descriptions he had been given of the red tights and big bird sweater Melissa wore that night. But without a duplicate outfit to make an exact fiber comparison, he was at a dead end.
And so I went home, spoke to my wife. Of course, she straightened me out right away that if it had a big bird on it, it wasn't Winnie the Pooh, and it had to be sold at JCPenney's, having young kids of my own about the same age.
Diedrich asked his wife if she kept any old JCPenney catalogs in the house from the last few years. She said she knew she had a Christmas catalog.
Teased me about being a pack rat. I think it
Diedrich was astonished to find a picture of an outfit that exactly matched the description of that worn by Melissa.
JCPenney's catalog. I collected it 2 years ago at Christmas.
Oh, great.
The FBI contacted JCPenney, and the store began a search of its records. For more than 2 months, Tammy Brannen had anxiously waited by the phone for some kind of information or word about her daughter.
Where is she?
Then, completely unexpectedly, she received a phone call. A man's voice told her he was holding Melissa for ransom and that she must deliver $75,000 the next day, or her little girl would be seriously hurt.
Can I talk to her?
Had Melissa been found?
Yes. Yes.
The national statistics will tell you that a child who's abducted by a stranger is usually dead within 3 hours of the abduction. So the likelihood of Melissa being alive months after the abduction is extremely slim.
Mom, they have Melissa.
Tammy immediately called her mother, but Detective Wilden cautioned them not to let their hopes get too high.
No, don't call anyone. I'll tell you all about it. Just come over right now.
Once again, Melissa Brannen was about to become front-page news. Detective Wilden had instructed Tammy Brannen to cooperate with the ransom demands in the hopes her daughter would be recovered alive. As extortion falls under federal guidelines, the FBI coordinated the ransom drop. The FBI SWAT team was ready when 2 young men showed up in the parking lot to pick up the money.
I see them getting ready to open up the door. I got the bag. Go. Here we go. FBI, freeze!
They were quickly arrested. But did they have Melissa in their possession?
The information provided in the ransom call was so vague and so generalized, it's entirely possible that the person who called may have picked up that information simply by watching the news or reading the newspaper. Usually if there's a ransom demand that is legitimate, they're going to have very specific information that would be known only to the abductor and probably some of the investigators.
The 2 arrested youths were former students and roommates from a nearby university who had seen an opportunity to make some easy money out of Tammy Brannen's tragedy. They were convicted of 5 counts, including conspiracy and extortion, in the United States District Court in Alexandria, Virginia.
Turned out to be just a terrible hoax. I mean, just terrible. The notion that you would do that deliberately to a mother who was going through what she was going through.
There were copious amounts of dog hairs in the tape samples collected by Fairfax County crime scene investigator Jim Gogan, as well as dozens of human hairs. FBI lab examiners separated and painstakingly subjected each one to testing. Finally, a hair was found that was different from the others. The hair was a very light blonde, the only one of its type found in the vehicle. But it was an exact match with the hairs found in Melissa's hairbrush. Matching the human hair with Melissa was the second big match for Diedrich. But the critical link of Melissa's clothes to the fibers from Hughes's car was incomplete without a duplicate Big Bird outfit to analyze. Because it had been a special Christmas outfit, produced only once, it could not be found in stock. JCPenney gave the FBI a list of people who had purchased the outfit from its catalog division.
They then sent FBI agents out across the country to locate those people and determine if they still had the Big Bird outfit that they had bought from the JCPenney catalog, and ultimately they were able to locate a sample outfit from a family that still had the outfit.
Obtaining the outfit could mean the difference between conviction and acquittal in the case. The FBI asked the family traced through the JCPenney records to send it to their crime lab.
Well, I remember that day pretty clearly. I knew the outfit was coming in. The fiber color, according to the color in the catalog, was navy blue. But the fibers that I was finding were sort of purplish blue. So I was a little anxious that maybe this wasn't the same outfit, that maybe we were going in the wrong direction. So when that package came, I was, again, uncomfortable with even opening it, because I thought I was on the right track, but I didn't want to be wrong. I opened up the box, and sure enough, it had a purplish coloration to it. So it kind of gave me a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling there that I might have the right color anyway.
Fibers were pulled from the red cotton skirt and the blue acrylic sweater. A thorough analysis of the fibers from the outfit indicated an identical match with the fibers from Hughes's car. From the red cotton threads to the blue acrylic yarns to the yellow cross threads from the plaid skirt, the duplicate Big Bird outfit matched in every respect with the car fibers.
What I was finding was meaningful evidence that an abduction had taken place, that in fact the victim, in all likelihood, had been in the front seat of the subject's car.
With the new evidence, the prosecution could now piece together the actions of Caleb Hughes on the night Melissa disappeared. At the party, Hughes had tried to pick up several adult women, but when they rejected him, he sought a substitute. Fueled by frustration and alcohol, Caleb Hughes became a desperate predator with a perverse desire. His stalking eye fell upon the children. He waited and watched until an opportunity presented itself. When it did, Caleb Hughes seized an innocent and trusting child.
Hey, Melissa. Hey. Remember me? Come here.
By abducting Melissa Brannen, Hughes had crossed the boundary into the unspeakable.
We got to we should catch up with each other.
The analysis of the duplicate Big Bird outfit produced compelling evidence. It would be a powerful tool in the case against a man who investigators felt was a ruthless child molester and murderer. But Agent Diedrich had to convince the jury how incredibly unlikely it would be that these fibers had come from any source other than Melissa's outfit. He began asking people at the FBI to give him any items they may have made of navy blue acrylic. He collected more than 100.
And the objective was to see, do the fibers that I found on the front seat of Cal Hughes' car, do they match any of these? The answer was no.
From the items, Diedrich collected 126 different acrylic fibers. He made 7,983 comparison tests with those fibers against the ones found in Hughes's car. Out of almost 8,000 tests, only one succeeded in making an exact microscopic match with the blue acrylic fibers found in Hughes's car. And that was the duplicate Big Bird outfit.
Whenever you match two things, it has a lot of significance. These aren't random events. These, in most cases, occur. Is it possible? You can't deny the possibility that it could be a coincidence. But after looking at this stuff for a lot of years, I'm not a big believer in coincidence.
3 weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin, as investigators made final preparations for the case, a stunning development occurred. They received a phone call. 2 counties away, police had just found the body of a child on the median strip of Interstate 95.
I'll be right there.
I called Weldon. We got in his car, and there was absolutely no doubt in my mind that that was going to be it, because Hughes knew that area, spent time down in that area. I said, wow, this is going to be it.
That section of median on I-95 is wide and densely wooded. It would have been easy for Hughes to pull over, hide the body among the thick vegetation, and drive off unnoticed, and there would be little chance of someone finding the remains. But someone found a body. Was it Melissa's? If it was Melissa Brannen's body in the highway median, Fairfax County Commonwealth Attorney Robert Horan felt he could put Hughes behind bars on murder one charges. His hopes were high, but they were soon dashed.
As soon as we got there, as soon as I saw it, I knew it wasn't Melissa Brannen, because the skeleton had rings on 3 fingers. But it was a young girl. She's 13, 14-year-old who had been in that media for 2 growing seasons.
The young girl's body was never identified. Finally, nearly 1 year after Melissa's disappearance, Hughes was arrested on a grand jury indictment for abducting Melissa Brannen. He was transferred from the Prince William County Jail to the Fairfax County Jail. Horan had delayed the indictment for several months in the hope that Melissa's body would be found.
By then, I know we were all pretty satisfied that the worst had happened to the child. Unfortunately, under Virginia law, you can charge somebody with murder without the body, but you have to be able to prove where the murder occurred. And of course, without the body in this case, we had no way of proving where it occurred, so we couldn't charge him with murder.
Abduction with intent to defile was the strongest case that could be brought against him. Hughes pleaded not guilty. Few people in Fairfax County believed that Melissa could still be alive. But everyone, most of all Tammy Brannen, needed to know what had happened and needed to see justice served.
Because it's tremendously important that the family of that child had definitive answers, that they know what happened to their child, even if the news is not pleasant. They need to understand exactly with concrete information what happened to their child. They need to be able to have closure. They need to be able to give that child the burial that they deserve and go on with their lives.
With Agent Diedrich's airtight analysis of the trace evidence, Robert Horan went into the trial confident that he could convince the jury beyond reasonable doubt. The trial began on February 26, 1991.
Looking good.
A chief part of Horan's strategy was depicting Hughes' deviant sexual behavior at the party. He produced several female witnesses who recalled the crude, vulgar sexual propositions he had made to them, and others who testified he had spent considerable time playing with Melissa and had been talking to her just before she disappeared. His behavior was even more extreme, trying to eliminate the evidence. Washing his clothes, his leather belt, his shoes. He could not account for the fresh cuts on the soles of his shoes. Nor could he account for his whereabouts for the 2.5 hours between leaving the party and arriving home.
But the problem for the defense is somehow you had to explain that time. And there was never an explanation. I mean, it would have gutted our case. Our case is over if you can explain any of that time.
Though tests for blood on the shoes had proved inconclusive, the prosecution was now able to show the jury the exact matches made between the rabbit hairs, the head hair, and the fibers found in Hughes's car. Nonetheless, the defense argued that all of the fiber and hair evidence was purely circumstantial.
It may be circumstantial, but it is powerful circumstantial evidence because it doesn't change.
In order to obtain the maximum sentence for Hughes, Horan needed to convince the jury that Hughes had intended to defile Melissa once he had her in his car.
And the only way the fibers from her outfit would have been found on the seat is that her coat had been removed while she was in that car.
The prosecution charged that Hughes could only have removed Melissa's coat for one purpose, an attempt to defile.
The true answer is that that 5-year-old was seated against her will in the front seat of that vehicle.
Caleb Hughes' trial lasted 8 days. After 9 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty of abducting Melissa Brannen with intent to defile. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison.
For the family members, it can't end because of the eternal hope, if you will, that someday this child that's never been seen, never been found, this child someday will appear. You know, and that's hard stuff. That is hard stuff.
Caleb Hughes is still serving his sentence today, and the body of Melissa Brannen has never been found. Eventually, Tammy Brannen moved from the Woodside apartment complex, but she never changed the telephone number that Melissa had memorized by heart, hoping that one day a call might come.